it's still not clear if the National Student Financial Aid Scheme will provide funding to first-time university students in this academic year. Higher Education Minister Blade Nzimande has promised to explain the final position after a cabinet decision on funding guidelines has been finalized. The minister says due to a budget shortfall at NSFAS, he's unable to commit to funding more students, but has reassured existing beneficiaries that they will be funded. Meanwhile, universities have also extended their registration periods by another 2 weeks in order to ensure that first-time students are not in some way left out. To get a sense of what could happen in the coming days, let's bring in Gwebs Qonde, who is the Director General at the Higher Education Department. Mr. Qonde, thanks for your time. Welcome to the program. It's great to have you on. Perhaps let's start with the context for the benefit of all our viewers. So funding is at the heart of some of the concerns have been raised, but in a context where 3 billion rand more was given to NSFAS in 2020, how deep a shortfall are we talking?
No, basically, the question of the processes at NSFAS at the present moment got compounded by the intricacies of COVID-19 that actually struck the country and inadvertently struck the system as well, which then resulted that the institutions should work out reprioritization of funds and direct them to funding all mechanisms and measures that are required to fight and combat COVID-19 at institutional level, as well as in areas where students are residing. Secondly, as a result of COVID-19, the academic year had to be extended. The extension of the academic year was not accompanied by additional funding. And during those months of the extension, students were paid allowances and other financial requirements towards helping them to carry on with their studies. This is how it has come about. However, having realized this particular matter and the importance of ensuring that deserving students are not adversely affected, especially those who would be going to our institutions for the first time, the Minister of Finance made a commitment in his budget vote speech that all deserving students will not be disadvantaged as a result of these developments.
Right.
Funding for them is guaranteed.
Can we really place the shortfall squarely on COVID-19, though? I mean, the Auditor General had flagged in a recent report that there had been about 500 million rand in the form of mismanagement at NSFAS due to some accounting irregularities, and that's just my term. Is it fair really to place all the funding difficulties squarely on COVID-19, where in fact we've known they've been around for quite some time?
No, the matters of irregularity will always be addressed in terms of PFMA, where an accounting officer of an entity or a government department is required to undertake a thorough investigation in order to determine as to how the irregularity has come about. But in this instance, one of the things that I think we should acknowledge is that thus far, there is no money that has gone elsewhere. It's monies that were paid to students themselves to support them through their studies. But the only issue that has been picked up is that those processes were not entirely compliant with some of the pieces of policy of NSFAS.
Yeah, but
hence then it has picked up the irregularity. But that matter is still subject to further scrutiny and investigation by NSFAS.
It's not a separate matter nonetheless. I mean, if the 500 million rand is still going to students, but not the students it should be going to, it opens up doors to the kind of situation we're facing now, where potentially people who need the funding in this instance aren't able to get it.
That's why the Minister of Finance has made an in-principle pronouncement that all deserving students will actually be supported. Hence then he directed that as officials in the Department of Higher Education and Training, as well as in the National Treasury, we should actually work out and identify policy and funding options and provide that to them as the executive authority or the principals so that they can be able to take appropriate decisions. And that process has been done and is finalized.
Do we know why that process is only taking place now when we've always known the fact that COVID-19 has brought on issues to budgeting, A, and B, the fact that many students would have to be in class by the state?
Now, the question of the extension of the academic year has actually taken the start of the academic year to March, April, and it's only the technical processes in respect to registration that are being attended. Hence, the institutions had to extend the period of registration for about 2 weeks to allow the wrap-up of all the processes that are actually required within themselves as institutions as well as in the broader system.
I'm not sure if I follow. My question is, how is the minister still ironing out issues to do with guidelines for funding from NSFAS at a time where surely he would have known when these students would need money so that they can get on with the academic calendar? Timelines, in my mind, should have pointed out to the minister that by now those guidelines should have been sorted out so that at the very least students who need this money can just go ahead with the business of learning.
No, the quantum of the shortfall is always informed by a data which would emanate from institutions themselves having finalized the processes of assessment and examinations and interacting with NSFAS in order to corroborate and clean up that data. Hence, then, the determination of what the amount would be which would be required, because you can't just second guess the number. You have to work on the actual information. So that then delay was caused by the extension of the academic year in finishing up examinations and assessment at institutional level. So those are the practical issues that the system had to deal with in actual fact. Hence, within a week, being directed in respect to what should actually happen, that was done, and that's why there are no major delays in the processes of the institutions in this matter.
DG, you might have come across reports that the University of South Africa, UNISA, is looking at reducing some of their first-year intake by a whopping 20,000 students. The EFF threatening to shut down the institution on the back of that. Do you know about this development? And if so, what's your response to that?
No, this is a matter that is being addressed by institutions as well as the stakeholders that are involved or implicated. But it's a matter which relates to the question of the registration, where the institution has actually identified that it has actually taken more than what it should in terms of it being able to offer the adequate services to the students that are coming to the system. Therefore, there is an overload, if you like, by that quantum. That's what the institution is grappling with at the present moment, and there are engagements between the institution and the stakeholders, and we hope that they will actually find the common ground in resolving this particular challenge.
And as the Director General of Higher Education, what does that common ground look like to you? In other words, what do you imagine ought to happen with these 20,000 students who initially thought they might have had a place, but suddenly now are being told, sorry, we've overbooked and we're going to have to deregister you?
The institution is looking at mechanisms that are available at its disposal in order to address the particular matter, because the question of registration is entirely a competence of an institution and the management of. We are providing policy support as well as oversight to institutions, but there are decisions that are taken at an institutional level based on mechanisms as well as facilities that they have.
In a situation where UNISA says we're going to have to let the 20,000 students go, would that be a decision that is acceptable to you as the Higher Education Department?
No, UNISA is not releasing 20,000. What it is looking at is taking into consideration the number of students, volumes that are in there at the present moment, how much it can be able to enroll afresh within its system. So that is the issue basically. It's not offloading any student who has been registered in the past in the institution.
All right. If we can go back to NSFAS very briefly, DG, I mean, to what extent do you think some of the issues at the funding scheme coalesce around the fact that there still isn't permanent leadership there? Randall Corolison has been the administrator in charge of NSFAS for quite some time now. Your department has said that it's extended his contract despite the backlash because A, it believes he's done a good job, but B, because you want to finalize the appointment of a permanent CEO. But that was 5 months ago. When can we expect a permanent CEO at NSFAS?
The CEO has started on the 1st of January at NSFAS.
So that CEO appointment has already happened?
Yes, it has already happened.
All right. Great to get that clarity. All right, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. The DG of the Higher Education Department, Gwebs Qonde, joining us there via our video line. Several issues still to be discussed around NSFAS situation. We'll be watching for you, no doubt, throughout the course of the year.